So this weekend, I brought your Encoded Healing Intention deck to Fireflies Festival. And before we get into the other topics that we have scheduled for today, I just want to mention that I pulled a card on Sunday when I was just blasted with tiredness. I slept in my car and was physically drained, but emotionally so fulfilled. And I wanted to keep going on Sunday. And the card that I pulled was Cultivate Gratitude. And this was at a point in the weekend when I was at my most frazzled. And having that card as a reminder made me more grateful for the interactions that did happen as people were still approaching my art installation, my little pop-up gallery, and it gave me more presence as I was winding down for the weekend ultimately. And having what I like the most about this deck is that it gives really practical advice and suggestions. It gives the card I pulled was Cultivate Gratitude, which is a very specific practice to embody in that moment. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the Encoded Healing Intention deck and what inspired you to create this, and also what that process was like.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for actually using my deck in the way it's intended and being connected with how it's supposed to help. Sometimes, with people in the tarot and oracle reading community, it can get a little more intense than that. So yeah, I'm just happy that somebody understands the way it's supposed to be used, and it's actually helpful in the way I intended it. So thank you, and thank you for sharing and bringing it out to the festival. And I'm glad it helped you in a moment where you needed just to get a little, supportive guidance. So that's awesome. Where I began, it was actually completely channeled through me, I'd say. It wasn't anything I consciously planned, I'm going to make a card deck and this is what it's going to be about. It was one time I was making a print for a show, and it was my very first card that I didn't realize at the time was a card. It was Never Hide, and I made it with all these masks and this layer and these layers, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting. I made an image with the intention of never hiding behind the mask. So I was I put my concentrated intention into the artwork, and I was wow, that maybe did something. For me, it helped me open, unlock something, I guess. And I was well, that's strange. And this was in the beginning of my spiritual journey where I wasn't even aware of what the higher self is. Minor tangent, but yeah, so that was the very first card. And then I was wait, if I can do something like that for this, I wonder what other kind of, energy or thought forms I can, encode, I guess, with my intention. So after that, they just started coming one after another. And this wasn't even a planned card deck until maybe I made about 15 or 20. And then I simultaneously started kind of getting into the realm of oracle decks and spirituality. So I was okay, maybe this can be a card deck, but it was not planned. It just kind of came through me, and all of the messages on the back, the Cultivate Gratitude, most, if not all of them, were kind of just channeled through this higher source, because when I read them back, it's not something I would write, if that makes sense. It seems like advice from some sort of higher dimension, almost connecting me to I kind of see it as myself from a higher perspective, being well, these are little tidbits that I'm going to need along my journey, and that might help me, so if that makes sense, that was kind of the creation behind it.
That's so cool. I have people tell me a lot that I should make an oracle deck, but I feel there's a lot of work that goes into it, and if it doesn't like come naturally like you expressed that this one did, then I feel like it's probably not really worth it, because it is supposed to be messages that are that have like a potent medicine to them in some effect, that give like, you know, some insights into our life. Like we pulled a card for this specific reason. Wonder when did you actually start the process of creating the deck?
Oh, well, let's see. My first card that I made was in 2019. And then I think the process of creating the deck began in 2000, maybe also 2019, like later in the year. So somewhere between I don't know, the past couple of years are a blur. So I think it was around 2020 that I maybe made the first print of it for myself.
The artwork on it is so original. I've never really seen anything like that, and I see it like behind you right now. Is there a specific intention to the one that you're using as a background?
Oh, this is actually a different project now. I've kind of I've kind of strayed away from doing the encoded healing intentions, and this is a whole other story. This is from my new project, Mirror Vision. So the intention behind this is a little different, in the same vein though, because I'm really inspired by psychology and rewiring certain thought patterns and thought forms. This one is basically working on the basis of EMDR. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard of it.
It's so I like the idea of stimulating like the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and so this can help a person process their triggers in a way, and just form a better connection in between those pathways. I don't know, something about these mirror images, I find they're soothing to me, and so I just made this one yesterday, and I quite liked it, so I decided for it to be the background.
That's amazing. I love the candle chandelier aspect of it. It like kind of looks like a crown in the way that you're positioned right now, and it's just really, really amazing and marvelous. And I feel like you've been pretty prolific with creating these artworks. So they're made digitally, right?
Yes, I make them all in Photoshop. I call it dumpster diving for stock photos. So I make sure all of the elements in the photo are, free for use. Or sometimes if I find a really good stock photo and I have to buy it, I will buy it, just to make sure I'm not infringing on anybody's creative property. But yeah, I kind of do digital collage in that way by searching Google Images.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you mind if I pull a card right now for this podcast?
No, not at all.
I have the deck right next to me, and I like literally use this deck every single day. This is the one that I pulled yesterday, which is lessons, and it's shockingly relevant because I was like really integrating a lot of the stuff that I experienced like over the weekend. It was just it's amazing like how much can happen in just 48 hours of being at a festival. And also, while I am pulling a card, I just want to give your introduction. Eve Cat is on the Visionary Art Podcast today. We have Eve Cat, who is an artist and healer from New York City, and she's bridging the gap between visionary art and solutions of support for the tumultuous journeys that we all face in the modern world. She's channeled her talents, as she just said, into an oracle deck, which we are about to use. And it's the only oracle deck that I use. And I'm really like, this deck, like, honestly, it's kind of influenced my life in a really positive way. That's shown me what the intuitive aspect of myself, which is something that I've been really working to get in touch with, like understanding that, yes, life is all chaos. The natural world is just a clusterfuck of madness, and having some kind of intuitive guidance, I think, that comes from that chaos can kind of help us understand our place in the world and like what we're doing. So while I'm pulling a card, would you mind introducing yourself for people who may not have heard of your work?
Sure, and thank you for your introduction of me. Yes, I am a healing artist, and to me that means I use art as a tool, as an introspective and self-reflective tool to catalyze healing and transformation. That's how I work primarily. And then also I have most of my life been a very sensitive clairvoyant, and I also practice energy work. So I am certified in Reiki 1 and 2 and continuing for the master's. So another thing about my cards is all of my cards are also encoded with Reiki healing energy. So that's where the healing intention comes from. So yes, it's a little bit of psychology and energy work combined. In my process as an artist, I've been really kind of trying to bridge the gap between spirituality and mental health, because I feel both worlds are kind of interconnected and important. And it's in the spiritual communities, it can get really lost about actual like mental health, I guess, the understanding of mental health symptoms and issues. And, sometimes I feel there's something called spiritual bypassing that happens a lot. So that's been primarily my work, because I've struggled with mental health symptoms for most of my life. And I've been diagnosed and misdiagnosed. And I can just say so much about that. But basically, the entire process of my art making has always been to process these really heavy and deep, dark, sometimes emotions that I was having and was not able to express to anybody, especially in the earlier times when therapy and, there was a lot more stigma when I was growing up and back in high school and junior high, like, no, it wasn't really talked about. So I found my freedom in art creation, and I didn't even know at the time, but it was really helping me process my internal world and connect me as well to the external world, which, so there's just a whole lot in my artwork about that kind of cultivating that awareness about mental health and how that impacts our reality that we experience as well.
Yeah, we're about the same age. Like, you're like around 30, correct?
Yes.
So you would have been in like junior high and high school in like the early 2000s. Is that correct?
Yes.
I was thinking about this yesterday. The early 2000s were a really brutal time. Like, if you look at movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, the bullies in those movies are absolutely vicious. And like, it wasn't actually that different, like, in real life. They kind of showed this, they kind of inspired or influenced this this culture of like aggressive subjection to our own like inner turmoil, and like, I feel terrible about myself and my life at home is awful, so I'm going to pick on this person who is maybe quiet or something. And I'm just speaking from my own experience, but I like that you touched on that, because that time in my life ended up being a really formulative time for me. And I can definitely understand, especially with how culture was at that period in history, was very it was interesting. Like, I remember in 2004, I saw a documentary on this a while ago. In 2004, like, you remember how American Idiot by Green Day was like the most popular album for months? Like, shows like Jackass and Viva La Bam, where they were just all about destruction and doing the most painful, stupid, most irresponsible things. Like the early 2000s were raunchy. I think as a culture in the last decade and a half, we've come a pretty far way in terms of spiritual growth and just finding our own grounding in terms of like what's important to us, like personally and spiritually. Because I do think that, these days there is still a lot of spiritual bypassing and that kind of behavior. And I think understanding that like all of our journeys are so different, all of our circumstances are entirely different. And having the tools and resources and the gentle compassion and support from our community is something that I think is really, really essential. And, finding what that means to us personally is like something that's really important. So I pulled a card and we got the card Burn, which is funny because I literally just lit a candle before I pulled that card.
That's fun.
So I'm going to leave it right over here for the rest of the show.
Yeah, summer solstice kind of like light it up.
Yes, long days of light that are just blasting us with good summer vibes. I spent the solstice this past weekend at Fireflies Forest, and we had the most insanely beautiful cacao ceremony that led to an ecstatic dance where they gave everybody cacao. There was probably like 100 people. There was a lot of us in this little space, and my pop-up gallery was like right there with my color changing lights on it. It was quite a moment. And they gave each one of us candles. I actually saved mine because I'm just sentimental like that, and it was an ecstatic dance with candles. Everybody had candles representing the light of the summer, and like it was this environment where we could just like where like you could make eye contact with someone and start making like weird silly noises, and like suddenly you were like friends without ever actually exchanging a word. And real life is like so not like that.
Yeah.
there isn't really a lot of like magic in our day-to-day lives. Like just going to the grocery store this morning, like I live in a town where like people are generally pretty like but I know that's definitely not quite true everywhere. I'm wondering like what kind of practices do you have to cultivate like magic or mysticism or well-being in your day-to-day life?
That's basically how I try to live my life. So yes, if I don't experience magic on a daily basis, I'm a very sad person. Sometimes I forget to experience magic, and that's sort of why I created the deck. I feel like when you have an intuitive moment or an experience where you feel like guided or connected in that way, it feels, I don't know, it makes me feel like connected, and it gives me, there's this Russian word, like it fills my soul up. I can't even, there's no translation for that, but yeah, it like breathes life into me. So if it's not with an oracle card or any other kind of like spiritual practices, besides meditation, I like creating. Sometimes I just, sketch or draw just to kind of connect with that spirit. Otherwise, how else do I experience magic? Just in little moments, like when I'm traveling, I tend to notice little signs like numbers or, I don't know, little messages on people's clothing. Especially like in the subway system. I don't know, just sometimes something catches my eye and I just feel like, oh, that was a magical message for me right there. So, I feel like experiencing magic is something that everybody can do. You just have to have your perception like open for it, and you have to be receptive and, welcome it in.
Yeah, and observing of because those messages, like whether it's coincidence or synchronicity, like they're still present to us, and they still carry an innate meaning for us personally. And I think that's important to pay attention, because it shows us like what we're really thinking about at that moment. And,
Exactly.
That's how we end up attaching meaning to these things, which is something that actually kind of gives me a lot of like faith that we all have this individual journey that we're on to create this thing that has an immense amount of importance to us personally. And I think finding what that purpose is one of the most important things that we can do in life.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I feel like they're all little breadcrumbs to the bigger picture, and it's kind of like an interesting puzzle, like an interactive game almost. I like to see it that way. When I experience those intuitive messages, of course they can be perceived or experienced through like your personal filter at the moment, but I find as time goes on, the messages or just my perception of things or my intuition develops over time. So how can I explain it? Like things that used to give me certain signs or symbols or messages don't really have the same effect on me anymore. So I end up like, I'm getting really like cryptic about this, but yeah, you just end up seeing things from such different perspectives. And over time, like the more aware you become, the more, the deeper meanings you find in these like moments. And yeah, I just feel like it can go on and on. It can really be just like this endless, exploration of creation and like your interaction with what's going on in your life and what you're experiencing. I think that's what it means to be conscious, or to be, to have your awareness, or to be aware in general, just to be awake and experiencing all of these things with some, I guess, lens of perception, like some, like an intention of how I'm like losing myself in my words right now.
It's kind of a complex, intangible, intangible like thing, because it's like really sort of impossible to actually describe what consciousness is. But I like where you were going with having an intention. Do you have a specific intention right now, like at this moment in your life, that you're like really driving forward, and you're like really acting on this intention and like bring it to fruition with every fiber of energy that you produce?
Yes. I have fully committed myself to letting go and surrendering of any expectations, because a lot of my suffering was coming from me trying to enact my will and impose my will and what I thought I wanted, onto my reality for a while. I was practicing magic and trying to get these things to happen, and no matter how hard I tried or what kind of intentions I had, like things would just slip through my fingers. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to surrender to the universe and my higher self and just let it guide me, instead of trying to kind of, force my small perspectives will on like the larger picture. Does that make sense? So I've been able to recently let go of the fear of not knowing, and just like take every day as it comes and do my creative practice, and experience my creativity and just trust. It's like surrender and trust. Yeah. At the same time.
So what does that look like in like practicality? Like what are some like daily practices that you do that kind of align with going with the flow?
Some daily practices I do well. I let go, first of all, of any expectations or needs. Like, I got caught in the trap of like, how many followers does my art have, and what does that mean about me as an artist, and like my validation that I get or don't receive from people interacting, with me online. And yeah, so I've actively decided, like, I'm just going to create and, let go of any of those kind of projections, or, because I'm a sensitive person. And after a while, I'd be like, oh, wow, start comparing myself to other artists, and just, it would become such a mess. So I just decided to, I'm going to just be me and do my own thing and not look at other people and, not measure numbers anymore. And yeah, that's how I'm thoroughly enjoying the process of creation. And it's no longer, am I good enough? Should I give up? Should I do this? Like, I'm just doing what feels good to me.
That's fantastic. I like that you brought up vanity metrics, because like something I've realized over the years is that like you really never know who's watching or who's listening. You really never know. Even if your post reaches 10 people, maybe one of those people is someone who resonates on a extremely deep level with what we're sharing. And like, if we don't share it, then like we'll never be able to reach that one person. And oftentimes it is one person that we reach that like can really make the difference in motivation and that lasting impact.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges I've been facing recently is recognizing that it is also a numbers game. Like, the larger numbers that we are of individuals that we're reaching, the greater chance of like getting a return on our efforts in our own artistic practices are going to be, which is, so it's like kind of a double-edged sword, I guess one could say. But getting I struggle a lot with getting caught up with numbers, and being in an environment this past weekend where I was like literally showing my art to people in person and having like personal interactions, like kind of like what we're doing right now, except not through the portal of Zoom, but like right in front of each other, like seeing each other's faces and like communicating subtle body language. Like, it's so hard to sell art online and to make an impact that's like positive, because there's so many other layers of just personality that we're experiencing, like when we're using social media. So I'm curious, like with your practices of letting go, what are some ways that you've kind of like removed expectations from social media?
Well, it's such an internal shift that happened for me. For a little while, I sadly subconsciously associated my art's worth with how many people are supporting it, like via Instagram or, just something like that. And I started getting really down on myself, thinking that somehow, like, I made that weird connection that, like, this must be these numbers, of people that I got to kind of interact with my work or follow my whatever, like, must equal somehow my artwork's actual worth or something. And it just got like really deeply seated in my head. And then I went on this like whole rampage of like trying to research on how to get, more followers, or how to get, my work out there, or, social media hacks. And like, I even took courses to kind of try to figure it out. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks one day. I was like, I know that my art is special, to me at least, and it actually also overshadowed all of the people, be it 20 people, but still the people that do tell me all the time how helpful my artwork is and how it inspires them. And, I'd be like, oh, thank you so much. But then it's like, where's the other 10,000 followers that are telling me this, like that support this, So yeah, it was just something internal that I shifted my I guess attention and focus on the lack of all the big, the big numbers of support. And I just started being grateful for the people that honestly tell me like their experience with my work, or, how when I was sending love mail out, for example, like my free art prints, during the pandemic, just to lift people's spirits and vibrations and things like that, I just the exchange I would get eventually when somebody would receive their piece in the mail some few weeks later, they'd be like, oh, this came at the perfect time. Like I was having such an awful day. And, it was so nice to get something in the mail that wasn't a bill or, just, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, that's why I do it. This is why I do it. Or, just those little interactions I have with people kind of remind me, why I'm doing it in the first place. And like, yeah, it got me away from that egoic game of like more, just to prove my worth or validate myself for some reason, So yeah, if that long-winded answered your question.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I watched that YouTube video about how to get 10,000 followers a day on Instagram, and like it's bullshit. I didn't learn anything. I'm not getting 10,000 followers a day. It doesn't work. Unless you're like I don't know. I don't even know how or who you have to be to get those kinds of numbers that they say you will get in the clickbait. Tell us about the love card campaign. Because I did something similar last year, right when the pandemic first started. I sent out a bunch of free stickers, but I'm curious about the this love card campaign where you you basically just sent art to like anybody who asked.
Yeah, basically it was kind of I forgot. It was a decision that I made. I made a bunch of prints, right, and then I was like, just starting out. So I'm like, well, nobody's going to know my art enough to buy these prints. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to send them to people because they have such good messages. And really what I wanted to accomplish was I just wanted to have my art in like lots of people's houses, hanging on the fridge, just in my mind, I just wanted it to make an impact, like a positive impact or difference. And it went all around the world, this love mail. Okay. So I actually bought international stamps, and it's like my favorite thing to send. I sent some to Estonia, Australia, New Zealand, like, I think China has some, like, it's just crazy with the internet these days. But yeah, so I just basically went on Facebook and was like, who wants free uplifting art prints? Just DM me your address and I will send it to you. Some people were kind enough actually, because I didn't know stamps were that expensive, but some people were kind enough to, give me a little donation, but, it was not expected. That did help with the cost of the mailing and stamps and stuff. But yeah, so that was that project. And actually, it's funny, what inspired this was an oracle card from another deck I was using. I remember the card specifically. It was called The Giveaway. And it said something about like, oh, you have such a gift. Now it's time to give it away. And I just felt like that was like spirit telling me like, okay, it doesn't make sense now, but just give your work away, So I was like, okay. And yeah, I guess the result was pretty good. And I hope to do some more again soon.
That's so juicy. For the people listening, like if you want to increase the connection that you're making with your audience, like do not underestimate the power of giving something away for free. Something that I've been doing is because I did something similar with a free sticker campaign, and I think it was April of 2020. I ended up getting like 100 extra stickers because they took a super long time to be produced, and I just ran this free sticker campaign, just mailing stickers out, and I did it the same as you by donation, and like I ended up just by asking for donation, maybe only like half the people actually donated like something, but it ended up being a little bit over breaking even. It was like just enough that I was like, this is a huge success. And having our art in other people's space, like even if we have to give it away for free, can be very powerful because we give away something that's really special and really important to us, that's going to really bring like a positive feeling to the people who receive it and see this, and they get to have this like little artifact of something that's created like from our specific little speck of human consciousness within this vast planet that we all coexist on. And yeah, I just want to emphasize like how awesome and cool that is. And it seems like intellectually it seems a little bit like counterintuitive to do something like that, but in actuality it's like one of the greatest decisions that we can make to create a bigger impact on the world with our art. Because this, like the first couple years of really acting, of when we come out of our shell of just creating for our own enjoyment and decide to start sharing it with the world and sharing it in that capacity in a way that pretty much anybody can access it, not just through the screens of social media, but like having an actual physical thing is so potent for creating those connections. Because I don't know about you, but all the artwork that I create it with the intention of having a very refined and nice physical object at the end of it.
Yes, I experienced that having your prints in my space. I definitely feel that intention for sure. Thank you.
Do you have your artwork in any like public places where people can go see it?
No, but actually I did meet with somebody. I'm going to bring it over to a women's center. So this new center is a place for women who can come together and do workshops and things like that. I think I'm also going to, get them into holistic healing centers and Reiki studios. So I'm just trying to find my audience and where it would best exist, I suppose. And also, yeah, what that sentiment you had about the physical artifact, I think it's so important, especially in this digital age, to receive something tangible and feel that connection. Like snail mail is so dead these days. I feel like we should bring it back. The ancient art of pen pals is probably obsolete by now, but I think it's super nice. And actually sometimes people would be like, wow, that's such a kind gesture. And they would be inspired to send me something in the mail. So then sometimes I receive like little trinkets or, tchotchkes and little cards and thank yous. And it's just so nice, there's just like makes your mood just instantly better. It doesn't even have to be anything like crazy, just a little note with a sticker on it. Just somebody's like, I guess taking the time to do something kind and nice for somebody just like really changes a lot of things, I think.
For sure. And receiving those gifts can feel so good. I'm wondering, what were some of like the best reactions that you had from people like while you were doing this love card campaign?
I actually have screenshots of some of them, as like personal testimonials, I guess. But yeah, some of the best reactions were the ones that would specifically tell me how magical it was because, also with the prints I made like, I have over like 50 cards at this point. And I just randomly selected, like, it was kind of like a test run. So I wanted to print a bunch of postcards with my prints. So I made like 4 or 5 of them. And I would intuitively select the messages that people needed to hear and just trust that whichever cards I picked, like out of the selection of 5 would be the ones that they needed. So, people, my favorite reactions would be like, I'm going through this and this right now, and this is exactly what I needed to hear. And I put it on my fridge and I see it every day. And, it supports me in my new journey of this or that. And that's just my favorite thing because, basically that it accomplished its its point. Even though people aren't buying them or anything, I hope to have them like one day in stores, kind of like greeting cards, but different. But anyway, the point is that it accomplished its mission, and that was just so uplifting for me as a creator to just get that feedback of like, yes, you did what you set out to do with this project. So yeah,
that's so cool. I'm tempted to start bringing my Oracle deck around to various shops in Asheville because I've been like marketing my art in person. I guess you could call it solicitation, but it's with art. So I'm like, here, look at this. Like, this is my gift. And most of the time people are like, oh, wow, you put a lot of effort into that. And I'm like, yeah, it nearly killed me. So I'm going to start bringing around your Oracle deck because there's a lot of places around here that sell like really niche decks such as that. Like so many shops. I love living in a sorry, what?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I'd be happy to if we could talk about that, but that's so
yeah, we'll discuss that after the show. But I do have one question that really popped up, and it's very relevant to something I've been practicing. I've been trying to distinguish between the voice of fear and my actual intuition as of recently. So I'm curious, like as a clairvoyant, when do you know it's like an intuitive message?
So this has been tripping me up for so many years, and literally even up until a few months ago. And it takes a long time it's the practice of discernment. So yeah, it's about discerning where this is coming from, especially because I'm a trauma survivor, and a lot of the times I would get triggered and think things aren't really as they are. So it was like a total mind, like just like, okay, am I reacting this way because I'm feeling fear because I'm trying, like my intuition is trying to tell me, like, warn me against something? Or, is it my ego, just being unruly? Which is it? Yeah. So the way I learned to kind of discern the two is with intuition. It's kind of like, for me, I feel like it kind of happens like from like the back of my mind. And it's like this calm, centered voice, this calm, like internal kind of knowing, versus like I feel like the fear and the paranoia, like they're more kind of explosive, and like you feel it in your body differently between the two. And this is where like practice and the perception, it takes practice and time, but you eventually start feeling like, how do I feel right now? Like, is this thought coming from like a higher place of guidance, or is it coming from like a kind of knee-jerk reaction like fear? And over time, especially with meditation, I think meditation helps with this a lot. You learn to observe your thoughts, and then like when you have that distance between your thoughts, you can feel the difference really between the fear-based or the intuitive guidance. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Because one thing I have noticed is that fear reactions tend to, or like fear voices, they tend to come from some kind of physical feeling or like sensation. It's like a physical thing. Like I'll feel something in my body, like a little ping of anxiety in my stomach, and it'll go right up, and it's like, oh, you probably shouldn't put that in this Instagram post. It's going to get less views. You shouldn't put that there. And I'll like flinch and end up writing something that's like not fully what I intended to share, or like tries to like make up for some inadequacy that I am aware of in myself that like literally nobody else is thinking about.
It's usually the case.
Yeah, except for me, because we tend to know ourselves better than anybody else does. So I really like that you mentioned that, because occasionally I have had those little whispers from what I know is my intuition. Like I'll be hiking or something, and it'll be like, hey, go that way. Just trust me, go that way. And I'll go that way on this little like side trail that's not marked on the map at all, and end up finding this utterly astounding location out in the wilderness that I never would have thought to explore or observe had I just been like, well, let's just keep going, let's stay on the path that we chose beforehand. Yeah. So
about intuition. It gives you those little gifts when you follow it. That's the other thing you learn over time, is like to follow those little treasures that you get when you do it. It's kind of a positive reinforcement, I feel like.
Oh, I love that for sure. It gives that reward system. So then like, oh, I'm so glad that I followed that little intuitive inkling that showed up, that faint little whisper from my higher self that told me to go do this one little thing. Because like immediately after I pulled the card this weekend, while I was blasted on Sunday, which is like honestly my favorite day of festivals. It's when the group personality is like at its peak. It's such a good feeling. But like immediately after I started practicing like gratitude in my mind state at that time, like I ended up in a circle sitting underneath my canopy tent, like as I was breaking down, with like some really amazing people that I'd like kind of acquainted with throughout the weekend. But then I got to like really sit with them and like have like a cool like group conversation, and it just gravitated these other amazing people towards us. And it was like one of those experiences that like I'll remember for a lifetime, just sitting in presence with these really beautiful people who are so like-minded in a way that like we don't always really experience in our day-to-day life. And like that kind of interaction is medicinal, and like I have my intuition to thank for that when I like was holding the bag that your oracle deck was in, and I decided to act upon that little impulse to like pull a card, and it transpired into this really beautiful like group interaction with these amazing people that I had met throughout the weekend.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Yeah, that's I guess the idea, is because what the cards are also meant to do is like subtly shift your vibration. So let's say, and I mean, we can get really deep into the quantum realm and physics about this, but let's say if, you didn't pull that card, you wouldn't have aligned with that kind of vibration, and maybe possibly you wouldn't have found yourself in that timeline of that group of people, but that's what I feel the cards also do, is they do that little subtle shift, and then it can bring you towards different experiences in very subtle ways that you wouldn't, you wouldn't like consciously understand how. So yeah, that's the other little magical part about them, because they also work on the basis of law of attraction, I suppose, in a way, and that everything is energy, and that we are energy, and it's just about matching to those vibrations. So yeah, they're like little portals in that way to me.
So what's your opinion on the law of attraction? Like how can each of us like individually embody this in a way that like really genuinely brings us the things that we really want in life?
Well, the law of attraction to me has been kind of like a doozy learning ever since I watched The Secret. I was like, wow, really thoughts do become things, and it's not just wishful thinking and things like that. I really do believe, especially over time, like the thoughts we think influence our reality. And I've been exploring really like, well, then what about people with mental illness? Like, what about people with anxiety or depression that can't help it sometimes? Like where's the bridge there? Where's the line there? Like that must not be fair. But it does make sense to me that, somebody in a depressive mind state will continue to experience and like foster that kind of vibration and reality that they are in. So, the law of attraction to me, it's definitely like a rabbit hole, but I really do believe it works. I've seen countless amounts of times in my life where I've experienced it directly working, and also, I mean, it's always working, I suppose, but yeah, it's just about becoming consciously aware of what we're attracting and how, how our state of being impacts, patterns that we experience. So yeah. I really like to observe reality from like this higher perspective, and yeah, kind of almost like scientifically to a point. Just observe the patterns and then adjust and rewire certain thought forms, and I just like to be kind of like in the driver's seat, where with my mental health issues throughout my young adult life, I didn't feel like I had that control. And I learned over time, with all these practices and things like that, how to regain that control. I suppose for the most part, not also control, but not entire control. It's like a dance between you and the universe and letting go.
Absolutely.
Woo-woo. Can I get any more woo-woo than that? I don't know.
Can you? I'm all about the woo-woo, and also just
I'm all about the woo-woo too. People talk, crap about the woo-woo, but I love it.
I do too, because there's a lot of facts to it. Like on an intellectual level, it feels very weird and like maybe not always correct. So we were talking about law of attraction and manifestation, and you were hitting on a really good point about like our mindset and like what we're kind of focusing on at that time. Something I've been working on a lot is I notice that I flinch from time to time, and not like a whoa, that kind of flinch. It's like a flinch in how I present myself or represent what it is that I'm doing. I try and like make up for some kind of shortcoming that only I perceive, or that most likely only I perceive. And I recognize that the reason I do that is because people in the past have like called me out on these little things, these like little things that don't really matter that much in the grand scheme of everything. And sometimes if somebody else is feeling insecure, then they can pick up on that and then acknowledge that little shortcoming within us. And I know that in general, people don't mean to like bring us down in that way. But I also recognize that like from eras of the past, that was something that kind of happened a lot. So I'm curious if you have any specific experiences that kind of like started you on your healing journey, or on your journey of creating and sharing art that is, meant to bring these messages of upbringing ourselves and like turning and transforming into the best versions of ourselves. Like, are there any specific experiences you had that like created the person that you are today?
Oh, so very many. I think to talk on the point you said of somebody kind of projecting an insecurity, and then that sticking with you, and then it impacting you, like always being insecure or overly self-conscious about a thing that's, as you said, probably doesn't even matter. People can tend to do that a lot by projecting their thoughts, and then we kind of adapt them. So one of my cards, Inner Knowing, had the channeled advice of don't believe in everything you think. And to go further from that, it's sometimes not even things that we are thinking. Like sometimes we were programmed with certain thoughts. The idea behind all of this work is basically to essentially reprogram and replace those insecurities and maybe misperceptions, or things that hold us back, to reprogram them, because they're a lot of the time, like you said, it's something that somebody be it parents or even people you look up to, they can just say one thing and they can just stick like in your mind. Now, you're running that kind of program in a sense. And yeah, I think, I struggle with, especially as an artist, with insecurity a lot, especially healing from trauma. Having traumatic experiences leaves you inherently vulnerable and insecure. And a lot of my experiences led me down this path to finding support in, spirit or, the higher realms, whatever, people want to call it, consciousness, or people can call it God, or people can call it, just the universe, anything, whatever sounds good. But a lot of my experiences that made me feel like that led me down a healing path. And, what is healing to me, really? I think it's to come back to our interconnectedness, because I feel like when we're insecure, we're feeling any kind of sad or bad way, inherently we become disconnected from who we truly are and everything around us. So I think a lot of my experiences led me down this path to going deeper and deeper and finding, understanding the mystery, or trying to, and like my place in it all. And I appreciate what you said about that, and how to be mindful and aware that some of the thoughts we think, or, projections that people made onto us, aren't even particularly valid.
Yeah, and maybe like not even really ours either, because we see the world from our own filters of perception, and that's how we're aware of like what's happening around us.
And society, like the big old society program. That's another story. But I'm sure that you and I both have experiences, kind of, I wouldn't say leaving society, but, artists kind of have a tendency to not like go into countercultures specifically, but, like kind of step out of the mainstream and have our own, solidify our own kind of reality, and accept or not accept the things going on around us because we feel like it.
Because we see creative people see the potential of what something could be. Like we see something and realize that like it's not a permanent fixture. It can always change. It's always possible for things to change. And like if it's something huge, like the overarching general rules of society that we're following, like we understand that those are not a fixed object within our society or within our culture. Like anything can change. And I think the overall mindset and way that we treat people and express our love for the people in our lives, or just how we interact with people is not a fixed thing either. And I think one of the really potent and beautiful things about art is that it comes from such a personal place within each of us, and it makes us it makes creators honestly quite vulnerable, because of just how much we're boring our soul to the universe, bearing our soul to the greater part of society, and like creating these images or songs or sculptures or like digital relics and artifacts that are just so close to something that has really truly impacted us. And I think it's important to acknowledge that in art. Like if we don't understand like some work of art or something, then there's like so many layers of experience that have led into this specific moment that this artwork was conceived and then brought into the world. And it's the result of countless years of various experiences. And I think it's good take that into account, like not just for like how we perceive other people, whether it's their creations or like themselves, but also like how we view our own creations and how we make the decision of what is important for us to create and bring into this world. I think it's important to recognize that the closer of importance that it is to ourselves and to the full on essence of who we are, then the more impactful that art is going to be, because it's coming from a more vulnerable and real place within us. Mm-hmm. And that's what I like about your creations, is that you have these like specific messages that come through with each one, and these really specific intentions. Especially with each card in the healing intention deck. And I really appreciate that, because it really acts on like a specific, entity of life experience that we all go through in some way. So I'm curious if, what are some ways that you like intuitively connect to what's important to you, to like your own essence as not just a creator, but also as an individual? Like, how do you find yourself?
Loaded question, Brett. Oh, well, this one word, sometimes I get these words. I mean, people call them downloads, but sometimes I get phrases or words that just repeat themselves. And for a few weeks ago, I got one that was parsing. Like, I don't know if it's what a computer does, but essentially, I kind of imagine it like, imagine you're like using a detector on the beach, like one of those, and then you're like filtering out like the sands and all the dust and rocks and stuff to kind of get to like the thing that you were looking for. So I feel like a lot of it is taking off like layers and things of what I'm not. Oh, I'm not this. And like sometimes I play a role for a while and I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, and and then something just doesn't feel right, and I'm like, and it's parsing and pivoting for me. Like pivoting was another word that came, like, oh, like if something's not working out or if something's not like flowing, just like pivot to this direction. And then maybe, it's just kind of a lot of experimentation. And, personally, as somebody I've always had like some sort of trouble with having like one sole identity as a person and an artist. It's just kind of like really trying to get down to that like self-expression, or, I guess the whole process in and of itself is me finding that, so like every part of the expression leading to closer and closer to that aspect of me, is essentially like a part of it, right? I don't know. I'm getting a little, not cryptic, but yeah. So something like that. It's just like all layers and parts, and then observing them. And, I guess that's kind of like the process of alchemy in a sense, isn't it? Kind of like still boiling down and figuring out where like the gold is after all of the process.
I understand for sure, and I like that analogy of like parsing all the data that we receive in our throughout our day-to-day lives, and like over the years, it's just this accumulation of data that we must be like searching through to find what like really resonates with us, because something can feel good in the moment, but then later on it might not serve us or resonate with us in the way that it did when we first discovered it. And I think that's just part of our journey, is like understanding, staying in a state of flow where we are exploring those new things and discovering those parts of ourselves. Because even if it's not something that sticks with us, like let's say I went through an acrylic painting phase, which I guess I actually kind of have, like I painted this one and I'm like really pumped with how it turned out. But it doesn't. It gave me something through the experience of just creating it, and it left that little fragment of joy within me, because when I painted that, I was like surrounded by my friends. Like here in the studio, we were having it was, I guess it was a painting party. It might have been like a 420 party. It was like some kind of gathering that we had here, where I was like just in this puddle of people that I love, and like and we were all like painting and creating and like in our flow, and like for some reason it just turned out as a really good acrylic painting. I'm really satisfied with the results of it, which is that's super cool, because acrylic is, as a digital artist, I see acrylic painting and oil painting as like straight up alchemy. Like you're working with this goo and like mixing this goo with other goo and like these other materials, and you have to like mix it in like a specific way with like just the right amount of water, not too much, but just the right amount. And then you get this really smooth flow of paint from the brush, where it just kind of, the brush just like ejects it onto the canvas, and it like sticks or like interacts or integrates like with the canvas in this really fluidy, alchemistic, potiony kind of way. And it's really cool and satisfying when it works. When it doesn't work, it's like, what the fucking hell? Like, how do people paint with this? This is weird.
Yeah, it definitely can get frustrating. I'm originally an oil painter, so yeah, it can be as satisfying as it is frustrating, and that's like a strange dance.
I think the satisfaction also like makes the frustrating parts worth it, because like when you're trying for so long to do something with like no results, but you're like still determined, like having that like overly optimistic determination to like, I'm going to figure this thing out, and then eventually, after so many moments of frustration, you actually figure it out, and you can repeat those results over and over again. The feeling is, it's such a good feeling. That's like the reason why I love animation, is because it's so technical. Like there's so many little problems that like you just wouldn't expect to come up that will appear as you're going through the process, and like it can add on substantially more time. But every time that we get one of those little hiccups in the process that like causes this frustration, we learn something about how to move past it. And having that knowledge is such a juicy part of life. I think it's like the frustration is like the salt or the pepper that like just makes life a little extra spicy for us.
Yeah, and then that feeling of accomplishment when you get past that threshold, I guess. Yeah. To touch on what you're saying, I discovered that when I paint, I learn so much through those little peaks and valleys. Like I actually learn very valuable life lessons, and it surprised me every time. Like I learn patience, I learn just so many things. And actually I have been starting to do, on a side note, I wouldn't call it coaching, but just like artistic guidance. So I help people kind of navigate that process to be able to self-reflect as they're creating. It's healing art, so I can't call it art therapy because I was studying art therapy, but you know, you have to be licensed to practice as a psychologist and therapist. So yeah, I found just this magical way that art can be healing in this guided way that's not necessarily, you know, clinical or anything, but yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. I call it art magic because it's transformative, and the process itself can uncover a lot of things for people. So yeah, it just made me think of how valuable, you know, the process of art making is and creativity can be for us, and how much we can take from the little gems we discover as we're creating.
I love that. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I really want to ask more. Just to like kind of continue on that, like creating paintings, like creating a physical thing or a digital thing, like when we're feeling a particular emotion, like I found for me personally can really help transmute that emotion into something physical that like becomes an artifact like of that feeling and that feeling of accomplishment of creating this thing, even if it comes from like a really dark emotion and it's a very dark work of art or whatever, can be really healing in a great sense. I want to ask you more about like what does like art magic look like in practice? Like how would you get someone started on that? Or for the viewers listening, like how could they, kind of look into doing this themselves to like have some transformational art creation experiences?
Sure. Well, it's all about intention. So to touch on what you were just talking um, when you transform or transmute those feelings into an artifact. In art therapy, we call that sublimation. So it's taking like really intense feelings and, converting them into positive results. So that's what they call sublimation. And it's kind of like, taking that psychic energy and, using the creative healing process of artwork to, as you said, transmute it. I think it's a pretty magical process, actually, because you're taking something intangible, and just by means of knowing which materials to use, you can express that, like something really powerful for me to do when I'm feeling depressed and just a lot of heavy energy or emotion. I like to grab a piece of charcoal, and just get really messy. Just go and draw, doodle something. Usually I just have a tendency to draw a face. And usually the outcome is what I'm feeling on the inside. So it becomes like this reflection. And because I'm able to like kind of get it out on a piece of paper, I'm able to like step outside of the experience of it, and then observe it from a higher level. So yeah, and I think that's really helpful for when we're feeling really sad and down. It doesn't even have to be a charcoal. I just like that because it gets really messy and just black and dark, and you can do a lot of things with it. But it could be any preferred art material. But what I could suggest for the viewers to do, like some intentional artwork, and maybe even journal after, like. So I guess it would be like a little bit like, what are some feelings that you're currently, that are bothering you, or some thoughts or an experience that you just had. And maybe if you can just free flow, draw or paint anything, it could be any colors, Usually people give me the excuse like, oh, I don't know how to draw. I can't draw a stick figure, but that's actually very false belief system there. It's just that art skills weren't taught, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't draw or paint. The other thing is to take away the judgment from the experience and any expectation. We're not trying to paint the next Mona Lisa here. We're just trying to use the art as a tool to express ourselves and understand our internal feelings that sometimes are really hard to even like consciously or logically, pull apart, tease apart. So when we make any kind of painting or drawing, just it can be very simple, and then ask ourselves questions about it after, and questions about how we're feeling afterwards compared to how we felt before. And if there's anything we discovered in the process, it's all about just making it with awareness and intention, to get something out of it. So usually through that process, you'll be able to learn something in that self-reflection.
I think that's so important what you said, that like it doesn't, skills don't really matter. It's about it's about the transmutation of whatever it is that we're feeling at that moment. I know just from personal experience, I've most of the artworks that I've made, in fact, almost all, there's only one exception to artwork that I've made that was like a direct transmutation or alchemization of certain emotions. Like that art that I've made in that state is so bad. Most of it is absolutely terrible. And like, I remember sharing it online and it just got like, no attention because people didn't know what to do with it. But for me, like, it was really important to like get that out of me. The only artwork that I've ever made that was like actually like did reasonably well is my artwork Deserted Digital, which I'm pretty sure that you have a print of that one. It's like the person in the desert. There's like a little they're like on the ground, like hanging onto a stump, like looking at this distant colorful city. And I made that one when I was experiencing extraordinary financial stress. I just moved to a new house. The relationship I was in at the time was getting really rocky. I had like next to no money. I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. I was like freaking out, just messaging anybody who like record labels, musicians, brands, various influencers, just like, hey, let me do stuff for you. I was like in a desperate state of like needing support, like financial support at that time. And I drew this image. I think it took me like 3 days or something. It came out super fast. And it was about that struggle of crossing through the uncanny valley. Actually, it's behind me right now. It's really far, but that artwork ended up doing really well because so many people related to it, and so many people have passed through the uncanny valley. That I think we were discussing earlier. It's this land that's mostly empty. It's incredibly vast. From a great distance, we can see these magnificent structures and cities and formations of the natural world, but we can't reach them just yet. We're so far away, and we have our little animal friends on our back that are along with us for the journey. They're our children, and we love them. And yeah, all the other artworks I've made when I'm in that state of like so just not knowing what's going to happen, haven't come out that good, and that's perfect. They were perfect for what I needed to do. And I loved your description of like how people can get started on that. But this has brought up something else that I've been thinking about a lot. And actually, I have a video that I've finished the script for that I'm going to film it this week, I hope. But like, what, in your perspective, if a friend comes to you and says, Eve, I'm having a really hard time in life right now. Like, I don't really know what I need, but I just know that like these are the problems that I'm dealing with. What's the best way that we can be there for them and support our friends when they are lost in the uncanny valley and are having a hard time? What's the best way to support our friends?
I think that's an excellent question. And I just wanted to say thank you for making that artwork, because it's hanging up on my wall. And it's actually, when I first received it, I was kind of in that uncanny valley myself. And I was very scared, and it gave me hope. Like just the way she was looking out into that landscape, like even though I have no idea how I'm getting there, like it's there, and that's all I need to know, So it gave me a lot of hope in the darker times. So I wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for creating that. And that's just the magic and power of art, because you expressing that feeling, and then other people receiving it well, because we're all, connected and we share these similar experiences, especially as artists. So yeah, I think that was awesome. And thank you, because it's still it's like a very inspiring image. So yeah. And to answer your question, what can we do to help our friends who are struggling? Number one is just be there, compassionately, empathic listening, be as compassionate as possible. I feel like a lot of the times when people are in those distressing states or experiencing that distress. I think the thing we want most in that moment is connection, or like somebody to just hold our hand and be like, yeah, I know this freaking sucks and we're so confused and, we don't know, but, at least you're here. At least you're listening. At least I know I'm not alone. I think that's the worst part about mental illness or any kind of mental unease is feeling isolated. And especially because feelings like those tend to make people want to isolate themselves because because of the stigma and they don't want to share. But the best thing we can do in those situations is really just listen and offer compassionate. Sometimes I don't even like offering my advice unless it's asked for, just compassionate listening. And sometimes when I can tell somebody is blowing their situation out of proportion, from my objective perspective, there's something called we can ask them questions like, is that necessarily true? Like, do you think, or challenge their perception in a way that's not like damaging, of course, but challenge their perception enough to remove them from that state of despair, that because when people get into that like really limited perspective place, it just feels very small and, minuscule. And that's what we're around for, is to help people see like, it might seem like that, from your perspective right now, but, there's other solutions, there's other anything. Yeah, just being there.
Yeah, and asking the right questions too, I think is so important, because like the feeling of despair when we're just frustrated that the results we have been working towards are just not happening. It can feel like this invisible pressure is just crushing us, and we're trapped in this little bubble of like of sheer terror of like am I even gonna survive this? And like, yeah, just knowing that our friends are there for us and like asking the right questions, and like the empathy is so important. And I love that you brought up advice, and not giving advice unless you're like specifically asked to give advice. Because when we're in that state, I find that more often than not, we already know what it is we need to do. It's like, it's already there, but it's easy to be so emotional about the experience itself that we don't, that like we just doubt it. We don't think that the thing we already intuitively know is the right decision. We just don't want to do it because it's such an emotional place that like having a little bit of encouragement and perspective from a good friend such as yourself can be that little push that like gets us out of that corner and gets us back into flow state where we're creating from a place of confidence and like kind of reckless optimism. Because to forge our own business in this world, we have to have a reckless optimism and knowing constantly that there is that opportunity for success in what we're doing. And back to advice, which is actually what this coming video is about. It's called How It Feels to Get Advice When You Need Support. And this is based on personal experiences, because I've like, mentioned to friends in the past, like, hey, like I'm having a hard time right now. It's nothing to do with you. Like, I'm kind of having this struggle in my art path right now. And it's very difficult for me to like communicate in the way that I normally do, or even the way that I would like to. And if they're like, oh, you're struggling, you should make shirts. I know this guy who's making shirts. He's killing it right now. You got to make shirts, dude. It's like, no, but yes, I already make shirts, but that's not what I really want to do. Like, can I at least express like what I need to do? And they're like, have you heard of Etsy? Etsy's this website on the internet. You can sell shirts on Etsy, and then you won't be broke and starving and dying.
Oh, I love those. Oh, man. Moment of silence for those advices.
Shout out to all the people who tried to help and made us feel worse. I know your intentions were good. I know it. I know you were just trying to help, but you did the total opposite. And that's why I'm making this video, because I think that's so important to, to recognize just the best way that we can actually really be a good friend who's able to be there for us, for the good times and also for the hard times. It's really all about empathy.
Mm-hmm. And it's a two-way street too. It's also about knowing, this is why I'm a mental health awareness advocate, and I advocate for, ending and killing the stigma around these things, because that's what we need is connection in those times, and most often people are too ashamed or just can't really verbalize that they need some support for whatever reasons, either their upbringing or whatever projections that they think it'll make them vulnerable or weak or something. I just really wish that more people would be able to be like, wow, I'm struggling right now. Like, I need to share this with a friend, or I need somebody to listen. I just need somebody to hear me, yeah. And I even advocate for the mental health hotline, when people are going through emotional distress or even suicidal crisis, if it gets to that point, because it can easily in our world today. Even just talking to a stranger, and I hope maybe you can link this number, this hotline for people, because people misunderstand the hotline as, if I call them and tell them I'm upset and even thinking about dying or something, then they're going to send police to my door. They're going to raid my house, it's going to be a mess. They're going to throw me out, throw me away into the, psych ward or something. But that's actually a big misconception. They're there for listening to people in those heightened states of distress, and they talk them down. They're professionally trained in talking them down from that heightened state of psychological distress. So yeah, highly recommend that line. Sometimes it feels like when, you're in that place, it might feel like too much of a burden to unload onto your friends or family. Also, that's why that line is super helpful. It saved me on countless occasions, especially when I was a little disconnected from any kind of social support or friendship support. Yeah, it's really just good to have somebody listen to you and just talk you through it.
That's so important, and I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because I know personally I've had so many times where I'm like, I really need to talk to somebody about this. And knowing that I have a support network, or even just a number that I can call to talk to a stranger who's in a place where they can actually just have a conversation with me. One thing, when I worked for, I used to work for Apiron, which is a genetic health, epigenetic health company here in town. And the head doctor there, Dr. Dan Stickler, he's a super brilliant guy, incredibly smart. He's one of the people who has done a lot of work in actually mapping the human genome and which genes are attached to which physical trait that we have, and also personality traits, because those are also encoded in our DNA. But one of the most important and profound to me things that he said in regards to coaching is that whenever he was on a coaching call, he would to help somebody improve their own health, he would basically just ask them questions, and he would get them to talk about themselves. And more often than not, people would just really open up, and they would really express so much about themselves, to the point that they were having their own breakthroughs and their own realizations, and they were coming to these conclusions on their own, just from a little bit of encouragement from somebody who is in a super nice position to share and encourage this kind of information and give really good feedback from a biological perspective. And he told me, he's yeah, I've had calls where I've said maybe 20 words Like I spoke twice on I said 2 sentences on a half-hour call, and by the end, the person on the other end is like, this call has helped me so much. Like, you really know what you're doing here. I really appreciate like the work that you are doing, and I'm so grateful that I decided to work with you. And that just struck me as crazy because like he's a super smart guy. And he wasn't really giving advice. He was just like more or less agreeing with someone when like they were expressing something true to them. Just like, yeah, that sounds right. Like, yeah, wow, that's an intense thing that you're going through. Like, I think you should do that. That sounds like the best thing for you. Because it's like like I mentioned before, we often already know what the best thing for us is. It's already in there inside of us somewhere, and it's easy to lose that amidst all the layers of chaos that life will throw at us. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna mention, or in the description, I'll leave the mental health hotline, just because I know that for somebody who needs it, that it could be an incredibly important resource. Would you be open to like talking about like what one of your experiences calling this, or like how, or like reaching out to this number? Because I think a lot of people might feel a little like, oh, well, I only need to do that or call that hotline if it's like really critical. But I think oftentimes we get to states that are really critical and we still just doubt the severity of it. Would you be open to talking about one of your experiences with calling them, or something that a friend has told you?
Of course, yes. One that really sticks out in my mind, and usually when these places are called is when it's past the limit of like when, we should have reached out, and it's like really a teaching moment. But yeah, one of the experiences I used to experience a lot of panic attacks and anxiety. And just this one time after school, I was just breaking down. I was in out of town for my bachelor's degree at the time. And like, I was just so overwhelmed being like a single person living on my own, going to school, trying to go to work, like juggling all of it, and just feeling like I just had a complete and total mental breakdown. And I was driving, and like I pulled over, and I was like barely like breathing at this point, just like hyperventilating and like crying. And I just got the nerve to call somebody, and I was just like on the line, because I didn't feel like I could call anybody else at the moment. So I called them on the line, and I was like in hysterics, and I was like, I was driving right now. And then, they made sure I was safe and not driving anymore. So like they spent, I don't know, 45 minutes on the phone with me. I was just in my car, talking me down from that really panicked state. And of course they ask you if you're safe and if you're planning on doing anything. There's even been some occasions I've experienced a lot of suicidal ideation back in the times when I was really struggling with depression and just my mental health. So even sometimes I would tell them straight up, like, yeah, I'm having these thoughts, and then they ask if you have a plan to act it out. Things can get more serious if you actually do. I've never experienced a time where they forcibly admitted me, but I think it's a safe space where you can actually tell them like what you're feeling like doing right now. Like sometimes when, you're pushed over such an edge, all you want to do is escape that feeling. So it's so critical, and like, it feels like such an intense feeling and moment that all you want to do is, X, Y, or Z. I won't get into details, but, those people listen and they say, I understand why you're feeling that way. Like, can you tell me more about your situation? Or, they just talk they talk your thought process down from that very heightened, like impulsive state of being to, and of course they're trained in such a way to tell if somebody's really a danger to themselves, which more often than not, somebody is just freaking out and they just need somebody to talk to, So I think it's just a great resource to have, just to be able to, it doesn't even have to be in that kind of heightened state. That was just my experience with the panic attack and driving from class. But, another time I was just not feeling good. And I was like, hi, I'm having like really bad feelings right now. I just want to talk to somebody, and just, they're there to listen. They're just there to listen to your problems. So it's a good thing.
That is a very good thing, and I'm very grateful for you sharing that story. So they didn't like send any like people from a psych ward to your house or to your location. Like you didn't get like tied up and brought to a loony bin.
No.
That's good.
Yes, that's the number one misconception. I even told my friend who was struggling with depression, I was like, call the number, talk to somebody, talk to a therapist. It's okay. Like that's what they're there for. And then she's like, no, I can't, because they're going to take away my child from me and they're going to put me up, and I was like, that's not what's going to happen at all. And like, it blows my mind to think that so many people refuse to get help or treatment because they're afraid of something like that happening. They just kind of endure the pain and suffering instead of having somebody help, which is very
that is so important, and also like such a relief, because I know that this last year and a half has been very hard for a lot of people. And I know that I was around this time last year, I was really going through it and really feeling like this. And up until recently, I've only just begun to kind of like come out of this, but I was feeling these immense feelings of shame, because I used to drink a lot, and I had a period in my life where I was physically addicted to alcohol, and I just made a lot of decisions that I deeply regretted at the time, and in the long run, it was still like important to my growth. But at the time, and like going through those things, like I definitely had like times of suicidal ideation, and like I didn't really talk to anybody about it because I was just afraid of like what kind of repercussions it would create. And like, the kind of person I like to represent myself to the world as is like a very like goofy, happy, lighthearted individual. So when I go through those times of like really intense darkness, I'm like, oh, this is totally off brand for Brett Warriors. Like, this isn't something that I can share. I have to just internalize this and deal with it myself. And like, and that's definitely the hardest way to go through it. There's easier solutions, and there's always help and support, and people. I think we also underestimate how much people actually want to help. Because when someone comes to me and they're saying like, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this, and like I get the opportunity to listen, like they're showing enough trust in me as a person that they're willing to express this really dark, really vulnerable thing that they're experiencing. And it's such an honor. And in a way, like it's not, I'm not like, ooh, my friend is depressed. Like I get to impose my advice on them, which is what some people do, and that's why I'm making this video about it. And for people who've listened this long on the podcast, you get a little sneak peek at what's coming from Brett Warriors Media. But anyway, I think it's important that we understand how to support the people in our lives in the best possible way. And thank you again for sharing that story, because that really. Just hearing your experience with it like gives me a greater feeling of the safety net that is there, and the safety net that that myself and anybody else can utilize if we're in that really dark space. And I feel immensely grateful that like over the last month, having things open up again, like the mask mandate in North Carolina has been removed. So like now going out is not a constant reminder that like, oh, we're in a pandemic. Like things feel normal again. They feel somewhat normal. And this might be a little off topic, but I've also noticed this this lightness to everybody's energy, especially over this last weekend. And the weekend before that, I went to another party. There was definitely a feeling of relief and lightness, like within the communal energy that was going on at these events. That was like it was like a great feeling of like, we made it. We've gotten through this. And like for the most part, like we're a lot farther along than we were about a year ago, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel really good that we're at that stage, and I'm noticing a lot of people like kind of coming out, and a lot of the feelings that I've experienced in the last year are also like starting to lift, and like I kind of feel like a new person. After being stuck inside for a year and like unable to do anything except like run into the forest and eat mushrooms and LSD, which has been great. It's taught me a lot about myself. It's good to see lots of other people coming out in that same sort of way that we've gone through the shadows and through the darkness of being told by society at large that we have to stay inside, we have to be apart from other people. I think in a way it's kind of given us this new sense of fulfillment. It gave us this space to understand what we want most out of our life and out of the relationships in our lives, because we're kind of defined by the people that we interact with and the people that we choose to orbit around in our lives. And I think it's easy to forget that it's actually time alone that really gives us perspective on who we are from a personal standing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the pandemic was such a collective trauma that we just all went through, and I still feel like there's still so much to unpack and process from all of it. I feel like as much as what you're saying, that the light energy, the relief is there, I feel like underneath it, there's still some maybe shadow aspect of like, oh shit, that just all really happened to us, like it, for me as a person who's had trauma way before this event, like I'm noticing how I've been personally processing the entire experience. And, throughout the pandemic, I was thankfully like able to be talking to my therapist, and we were both like, this is crazy. Like, like the whole thing just, there's so much space to so much room to unpack, what that did to us all on so many levels, so yeah, I'm definitely glad we're on this seeming other side of it now, for sure. And things are seemingly back to normal.
I agree. It's kind of a beautiful thing in a way to see, to come out the other side of this collective challenge that we all went through in the last year and a half or so. It's kind of a testament to the collective human spirit and what happens when we all make a collective decision to stop something or to prevent something from growing out of control.
Yes, and I definitely believe it fostered our connection to our spirits and just to each other, because it was just such a shared experience for so many of us, and in every way that we can all relate now. It's like, yeah, we all really just made it through that, so it kind of in a strange way brought us all closer together, and maybe reminded us that we're not so disconnected after all, kind of, in a way.
Right. Like all the challenges that we personally faced going through this are challenges that pretty much anybody that I've talked to, like, about this particular thing has had very, very similar experiences to me. And that's like kind of a relief, because it was like a year ago, it was hard to really know where other people were at, because the restrictions were so tight and so closely followed on a grand overall scale. that, being able to connect on that right now and connect on those challenging experiences that we all went through is a really wonderful thing. And it's, in a way, it's beginning to forge new relationships and new depths of connection that we can make with the people that we know very well in our lives, as well as the people who we are just getting to know and knowing them better.
Yeah, I thinking about that. I've been thinking about that recently, how it just kind of feels like on another level, it feels like things broke down. So people so connections can be restructured, and I feel like people really are or have been finding their right paths through all of that somehow. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just makes me think like after, we lost people literally, and may their souls rest in peace, and all the families who struggled, I know some people that got sick, and yeah, it's just like through all of that loss. And then I'm sure, I don't know if you have lost friendships, just connections just like naturally fell away. And it just feels like some interesting, like divine reconstruction of like where we're supposed to be going and who we're supposed to be connecting to. And, yeah, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying that. So maybe that's a confirmation. I don't know.
I think you're really onto something that's really collectively happening right now, because it is tragic that so many people were lost. And you live in New York City still, right?
Yes.
And that was one of the areas that got hit the hardest. So what was it like during that time when things like first started getting intense?
Well, I personally at that time was following a very strict spiritual diet, and I was very be careful of what you consume, and that means like on social media too. So actually during that whole time I decided, I was like, I'm not going to be on social media. I'm not going to read all of these things and see all of this fear, because people, it was just like fear. So I was like, this is kind of scary, but I was like, I'm not going to subject myself to, consuming more information to put me more at a fear state. So I don't know, I guess somehow I was guided off social media. So I was not only socially distanced in one way, I was kind of completely isolated. And I took that as like some sort of personal time to myself. But how it was around me, the city was basically dead. I remember going out in the busiest times when there should be cars zooming around, not a person on the street, not a car on the road. I was just like, is this the Twilight Zone right now? Because this does not look like my neighborhood. Like, it was just like crickets. It was the most bizarre experience. I remember I was just casually walking in the middle of the streets, like where cars would be, just because I could, just to get that like feeling of like, yeah, this is really, yep, I'm just walking in the middle of the street right now, the busy street, and nobody's here to even tell me not to do it. So it was a very alarming experience in a busy city for it to just be so.
Wow, I can imagine. I remember seeing some videos on documentaries about the circumstance, and it's like seeing like metropolises where the streets are just empty. Like it's such a surreal sight, and I can only imagine what it was like to really be walking through that in the city, because New York City is a busy, bustling metropolis. I bet that it must have felt super weird to, be able to walk through basically empty streets.
It was very weird. It was weird and liberating at the same time. It was so trippy. And then the other trippy moments were like when it started, the first signs of like life again just started coming. It was kind of like this wave of like complete nothingness to suddenly like more cars. And then there was like, I remember at one of the points, there was just like this jump of like cars all of a sudden back on the street. And that was also disorienting. Like, whoa, weren't we just not doing this? Like this is like back to normal again, huh? And then it would like die down again because of like all the jumps and anyway, it was a whole experience that I'll never forget. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's it like now? What's your overall, after all this, what's your life look like now, and your interactions that you're having? And we're coming up on almost 2 hours. This has been a really potent conversation, and I'm really grateful for your time being on here. But yeah, I just want to ask, like, what's next for Eve Cat? What kind of projects are in the works and in the vortex of the future that you are birthing into the universe to share with us?
Thank you. Yeah, well, I am super excited. I'm returning back to painting now. As much as I love the digital work, I feel like it's also been a sneaky little excuse for me not to draw and paint somehow, because it's just, in a way, more, it's a lot easier for me, especially after not drawing and painting for a while. You might know when you're rusty, getting back into it just feels like a horror show, because you're like, I remember I used to draw and paint so much better than this. What happened? But it just takes some time to like warm up the muscles again. I don't feel like we ever really lose our natural spark for that. But yeah, I'm going back to painting, and I'm open for commissions. I'm open for my art magic sessions, which I've had a few already. They've been really great. I'm open, to just expanding my horizons as an artist, and I'm taking this really great artist course, and really just going to dive deep into my creativity once again, and just full send, full trust that it's going to take me somewhere, because yeah, I just feel like this is just my path and my calling, and I think and hope that it will bring me where I need to be.
Full sending it. I love it. Even just in, we've known each other a while, and like seeing over the last half decade plus that we've known each other, how your art and your offerings have expanded is really, really inspirational. And I'm really grateful to know you along that journey.
Thank you, and likewise. Yeah, you've been inspiring to me for so much of the time when I've given up along the way a few times. Like literally, I was just like, I'm not an artist. Art means nothing to me. Like, despair. And then I would see you getting, moving out there and then doing your own thing. And I'd be like, wow, he's really going for it. I remember thinking that on a few occasions, like, yeah, Brett, go get it, So it's really great watching you doing what you're doing and expanding in the way you are. So yeah, thank you for that. That's it. It's great to know people from like before, or like when you started out, and just watching each other's growth is so nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So before we do the closing notes, what's the message you would like to share with the world?
The message I would like to share with the world. I guess my message would be to cultivate compassion. I think compassion is going to save each and every one of us at the end of the day. When we're in arguments with other people, if we can just find compassion and empathy to understand what they're going through, maybe even if we don't understand, but just, to step outside of our own ego and needing to be right, and just, I feel like the world can benefit from more compassion and compassion for self as well. I feel like we're all really hard on ourselves and are striving for some perfection. I don't know who made that, bar that we all have to reach. That's ridiculous. And, it's really disappointing. So I just hope that we can all take it easy on ourselves after everything we've been through, and remind ourselves that we are strong and supported always. And yeah, I guess that's my message.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing what you do with the world. So where can our viewers connect with you?
Thank you for having me here also. They can connect with me on Instagram at Elixir Healing Art, and also on Facebook. I'm pretty active on there, on my page, Eve Cat with a K, cat with a K. And yeah, basically Instagram and Facebook is where you can find me.
Cool.
I would love to connect with anybody, any like-minded individuals on the same path with healing and art, and just in general with anybody who's interested to learn more about how, using art as a tool for self-reflection can be helpful and to live more mindfully.
Amazing. And people can buy the Encoded Healing Intention deck through your website. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Now I have a limited edition tin that comes with a crystal. Actually, I made a way for it to have its own little crystal inside, and it's a holographic version, so it's a fun one. It's shiny. And my website is www.elixirhealing.art.
.art. Amazing.
.art.
And of course, for the viewers, all those links are going to be down there in the description. I know that one of my friends is going to get gifted this deck because I want to check out the holographic deck. That sounds absolutely amazing. And Eve, thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you again for taking the time to be on here. I want to read the text on the back of the burn card that we pulled, just as a little closure to this episode, which is bordering on 2 hours right now. That's 2 hours of super good stuff. So, burn. The element of fire purifies and renews. It holds the qualities of passion and assertiveness. What are you ready to burn and transform? Purify and emerge renewed. Amazing. I'm going to burn a little bit of sage. I actually just put a candle out, but luckily we have another one going. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers before we close out?
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing my card. Yeah, I guess, the card kind of encapsulates everything we've talked about and everything that we need to let go, to go on to new heights with our newly ignited passion. So
yes,
I think it's great.
I love it. So for the viewers, all those links, again, they'll be down in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I would love to hear what you think of this episode. I would love to hear who else you would like to have on the show. And I hope that you have a great night, a great afternoon, a great morning, a great day, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me. It was exciting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.